Hi, welcome to this Nitro Fundamentals discussion on number formatting. Since a primary purpose for document programming is technical documentation, it's good to know how to deal with numbers in various formats. We'll be showing how to format numbers into various formats such as decimals or fractions. We'll be talking about significance as well as cultural settings, amongst other things. We'll hold short of going into equations formatting. We'll have another video on equations since that's another topic. Okay, so just a quick bit on the layout here. We have a single method right here called demo in our project, and this demo method's primary responsibility is to lay out content into the document. Other than that, we have a few variables and methods predefined here that we're going to use throughout our discussion, and we'll talk about those at the time that we use them. So just to show you how this is going to work, inside of demo document class here, we have a method called topic that we're going to call for each topic that we're going to discuss today. And that will place, I'll press F5 here, and you'll see that that'll just give us a little green indicator over here on the output side. So you'll be able to see the topic, and then right underneath it, the results of the content that we want to discuss. Just as we see here, the topic is that an assignment statement does not actually show up in the document. So when you're inside of a format or like a block, and you assign a value to a variable, or you execute other certain programming statements like a for loop, that will not by itself show content in the document. And by the way, like in C#, you can use the underscore to group your numbers, but that will not actually show up in the variable. The variable receives the number itself. This is just for visual reference for the developer. So this is the pattern that we'll be using throughout this video. So with that said, let's get to it. Okay, so our next topic then is a plain floating point number. So I'm going to press F5. And you can see here in the document that the number shows up here, which is the same number that we assigned to variable n, and we're showing here. So the idea here is, the concept is that when you just directly place a number into a formatter, in this case our formatter is a block. If you don't understand formatting, I would encourage you to watch our video on formatters where we discuss in detail what's going on here. So a block encounters this element of n, and it displays that element on the screen by placing it in a paragraph. So this is an example of doing simple math of some type on a number. So instead of assigning that to a variable and then displaying the results of the variable, we can just do the math. If we want to display it in our document, we can just do the math on the line. Let me press F5 here. And we can see the results come out. So we do the mathematical operation, and the results of that operation are the element that gets formatted into a paragraph and placed into the document as we see here. And this is the same concept as doing a typical mathematical operation here, except in this case, we're actually calling an external method, and the results of that method are then added to one, and the results of all that become the element that is formatted and placed into the document. So F5, and there we go. So here we're talking about the text digits. As you can see in our prior operation there, we have a bunch of points past the decimals. Well, we can control how many digits we want to actually show up for that number. So we press F5. And in this case, you can see that we're 3 digits past the decimal point here. You can change it to 2. F5, it'll go to 2. I can change it to say 10 and press F5. and it will extend the number out to 10 points. All right, let's put that back at 3. Okay, now let's take a look at aligning numbers. Since we know what we can do with text digits, let's see what we can do with aligning numbers on the decimal point. So I talked earlier about these pre-assigned things. I'm going to press F12 on this method here. It's going to pop us up here and show us that we have here a paragraph, and in it we set a tab stop, and in the tab stop we made the tab stop the type of decimal. So I'm just showing 3 of those, and in each one of those a number. We have N for one of those numbers, and then just 2 additional numbers. So I press F5, and we can see that that aligns the numbers on the decimals, because it creates a tab stop where when each one of these hit the tab, the decimal is aligned at the tab indicator. So that decimal is at exactly 1 inch. Okay, so let's talk about text radix property. This is basically setting the base numbering system. And we have 3 of these spans set up here. The first one is the typical decimal system we're used to. And then we've got base 16 showing a total number of digits of 4. And that's going to show us hex. And then we have a base 2 system, and we're going to show 16 digits on this one, at least 16 digits. And these are going to show the number in binary. So our number that we put in here, we just hard-coded 234, and we'll see it in each one of these. So press F5, and we can see decimal, 234, hex, and binary views for those numbers. Okay, so that's pretty simple to understand. In the event that you need to show something like hexadecimal or binary or whatever, you can switch to a different base system here using text radix and setting text digits as needed for your display model. Okay, next let's look at text significant. And text significant is a flag that is used in combination with text digits. So here we're saying we have 3 text digits, and let's work with them as significant digits. So what we're going to do is look for the 3 significant digits in each one of these numbers. So press F5, and we see them here. So the 3 significant digits in this first number are the first 3. Everything else is turned to 0. And then 5.4193 is turned to 5.42, the first 3 significant digits. And then to the right of the decimal point, when there are zeros preceding actual numbers, it's going to start at the first non-zero number and pick the 3 most significant digits. So in this case, 6427 turns to 643. And so that's how text significant works in conjunction with text digits. Okay, this concept is very simple. This is simply using text group, setting that flag to true, which is saying add the number groupings. So in other words, put commas in the numbers, or whatever it might be for the specific culture format. Okay, so this is also simple. This is adding the culture property to a particular number. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and group them together. We just talked about that. And we're going to add the culture German. And so we're saying German culture here, and then providing N. So let's F5. And you can see that the number is formatted with the decimal where the comma would go in the US system, and then the comma where the period would go in the US system. Next, let's look at scientific formatting. So this is taking N and adding scientific true, the scientific true flag to it. Now, right now, we're going to add in also text digits and text significant, to it. So let's see what happens here. So we have two numbers of significance. So that gives us 4.3. And then convert it to a scientific number. So we get the times 10 to the third. So if we take off both of these and we just run this, we're going to get the full number times 10 to the third. If we add back in just text digits 2, F5 on that, then we're just going to get two numbers past the decimal. And if we put significance back on, then we're just going to get the first two numbers of significance. 4.3 times 10 to the third. Okay, so now we're going to talk about text denominator. The property we're concerned with here is text denominator, and in this case it's set to 16. What this means is the maximum denominator is 16, and it's going to convert each one of these numbers where the maximum denominator is 16. If it's 16 or less and it can be reduced, it will reduce it down to the least common denominator. So let's press F5 here and see what we get for these four decimal numbers here. So 0.125 becomes an eighth, 1/2, 12 3/4 for 12.75, and then 1 1/16. So if we take into consideration that we're set here at 16, what that means is 1/16 is the smallest size that matters. Anything smaller than that doesn't matter. So if we make this last number resolve to what would be 1/32, then it shouldn't show up because it's smaller than 1/16, and we've said right here that that doesn't matter. We only want these at size 1/16 or larger. So F5, and we can see that it drops to 1/32 and only the 1 shows up. If I wanted to see 1/32, then I change that to 32, press F5, and we get the exact same result across the board, except it adds in our 1/32. So hopefully that clarifies how text denominator works. I also want to point out another method that you might use to format numbers using the .NET number formatters. And you can just go to .NET, search Google for .NET number formatters, and you'll get several pages of text formatters there, and any one of those combinations you can place here behind the text format property, and it will display the numbers according to that arrangement. So in this case, we're using P2. P is a percentage and 2 is the digits of precision. So we get 5.67%. So if we've left something out or you find it easier, you can use this to format a number into just about any state that you want it. Okay, we're going to take a look at rational numbers now in Nitro. So here we've got a variable being declared, R1, and another one, R2. And the content of R1 is 1/5. And the variable of R2 is 3/4. Over is a Nitro keyword. You'll see what they mean here. We're separating each one of these by 4 spaces, and then we're just displaying R1 and R2 directly. So F5. So we get 1/5, 1/5, 3/4, 3/4 as fractions here in the output document. So we can see in Nitro we can also add rational numbers. So let's F5, and Nitro does the math for us and leaves it displayed as a fraction. And we're going to talk just a little bit about formatting rational numbers. Now this is where we're using this method that we created above here. I'm going to press F12 on this, jump up here, and this is the method we're calling. So we Come back down here. We're doing that 4 times over for these 4 lines. Let's press F5 and see it. So here we are. So here's 4 and 5. So we got 4 plus 5 equals 9. And then same thing with these rational sequences here. So 1 over 2 and 2 over 3. 1/2 plus 2/3 equals 1 1/6, etc. And then here we're doing 2x and x. And we have 2x plus x equals 3x. So here is that same function again, adding 2 rationals, but we've added in a property here called text diagonal, and we set that to true. So let's see what text diagonal does here in the result. F5, so 3/4 plus 5/6 equals, and the result, all laid out in line. And the last bit on fractions are manually creating and or formatting fractions. So we have an actual formatter called fractions, and here you can see it, fraction, and inside it has these 4 elements. A fraction is a special formatter in that the first element is going to be on the top of the fraction, and everything else is going to be combined together on the bottom. So here we'll have x over y plus x. And in this one, we'll have top over bottom plus more. Let's F5 this and see. Okay, so here's our result. X over y plus x, as we discussed, and then 4 spaces, and top over bottom plus more. Now this fraction here shows these 2 parameters that are currently unused. Well, they're used, but they're set to false. And the parameters are diagonal is the first and compact is the second. So first let's try diagonal and set that to true. We know what that does because we just saw it above. So F5, and that should lay that out with the diagonal fraction, and it does. And now let's set compact to true, and that will simply tighten it up for better use when you're placing that, say, inside of a sentence or something. So that should give you a pretty good picture of how numbers are formatted in Nitro. You can imagine that creating something like a table of measures that may include decimal sizes such as metric and imperial sizes where things need to be shown as fractions, that these number formats would be very helpful in laying out that content. If you're using these features or any other features in Nitro and you notice that there's something missing or that something could be done better, then by all means, please join us on our Discord channel and share that information with us. You can find the link to our Discord channel in the description box below. I hope you find this information helpful. Thanks for watching.